Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 intelligent intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, here with my co-host Chris. I love to have him on the other side of the microphone, McNulty.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's always great to be here on the Intrazone. So today we're going to sit down and chat with TJ Devine about all things Copilot. TJ is one of Microsoft's leaders of Copilot. If you've seen his name before, he was intimately involved in the original launch of Copilot several years ago in the marketing org. And he got to be so good at Copilot, he jumped over to the engineering side, and he's got a role that helps him bring together so many different aspects of Copilot. And so he's fantastic at being able to understand it both from a user perspective and a technical perspective. And with that, he's got a unique window into what's coming around the bend and what are the best practices. So I just thought it would be great to have him on the show today, Mark.
I thought it was great, and I would tell you it was a great get, if that's a way to put it these days. And for our audience, as you hear when we get to our conversation with TJ, if you listen closely, or even if you listen from afar, you're going to get to hear things that are really powering how Microsoft approaches AI innovations. He looks at it pretty broadly, but he also uses it. So you're going to get a lot of insights into some of our core touch points across the integrations of products and different services. There's, of course, a lot of customer conversations that TJ gets pulled into, so you're going to get a lot of how are customers adopting Copilot and some of his favorite tips. And yes, we asked him about what he thinks about SharePoint plus AI and Copilot because we have that foundation. And as you heard Chris say, a little bit of a future glimpse into what Copilot has to come. So before we get to our conversation with TJ, Chris, I just have to ask you point blank, what was the last thing you did with Copilot?
The last thing I did with Copilot was asking it to assemble research for me on emerging trends in the use of agile methodologies for non-software development projects.
Okay, so you beat me. I think I just did one of the most common things, but it was very useful. I had a communication that went out to a couple of senior leaders with a team that I don't work with too often. So I just wanted to polish up my my paragraph of what I was asking them to do. This is for the conference that's coming up. I wanted to ask them to join us in the community lounge, but I wanted to make it more concise and a little more professional. So I tweaked it after I had written my first initial couple paragraphs to shorten it and make it a little bit more readable for people that don't know all the Markisms, if you know what I mean.
You just reminded me of something. I did use Copilot after that fairly lofty example, and it wasn't to double check on opening day for baseball. This being the Intrazone, I have to find a way to work sports in.
I'm hoping that you use Copilot to like check the who's going to win X or Y game so that you can do some betting.
Before there was a lot of responsible AI, and that's one of those areas where it says, like, I don't want to make predictions. I remember asking Copilot once for spoilers on, I forget what TV show it was. It's like, I really can't get into that. I don't like to speculate. I did use Copilot even more recently for something that's just so super marketing-y. I needed a single sentence description for a product, and I had written one, and I asked Copilot to give me 10 other ways of saying it, from pithy to inspirational to business-focused, and it gave me 10, and I found one that I sort of liked and edited that one up.
That's cool. Every time you do that, the thing that blows me away is how fast it does it. You know, of course it can do it. I get that these days, but it does it. You know, usually you would think it would have to go and look up whatever it's going to look up and, you know, piece together, but it does it really fast. I can't help but share one more only because it sort of popped in my mind and it's very relevant. It's the second to last thing that I did with Copilot, but it's actually Copilot on the consumer side. So I recently was helping my mom and dad with some boxes and moving in Colorado. And since they gave me a few of their things that they no longer wanted or didn't have room for, I had rented a van and I was driving back from Colorado to Washington. So the short of it is I had a few hours and making sure that I stayed awake. So I used Copilot every once in a while just to talk to it and do the back and forth conversation, which I've done it a couple times, but here are my two topics, and I'll keep it really short. One, I was listening to a book on tape by Cormac McCarthy called The Passenger. And as I was listening to it, I just got a little lost in between a little bit of the narrative. So I paused it, I went over to Copilot and I said, hey, I think there are two narratives going on, two different people speaking and sharing their stories, and they're intertwined. And just, did I get that right? And I almost said it just like that, just like you'll hear, and I won't spoil it, but how TJ encourages us to use Copilot. So I did that and had a nice conversation and got much more clear on the concepts and really how the story was laid out. It was really one of the mechanisms of each chapter. So it clarified it, and I jumped back into listening to it. The other thing is I was pulling into Boise, Idaho, who I've been there one time, literally about 30 years ago. I just as I was pulling in, but I asked it a simple thing. Hey, I'd like to go somewhere to dinner that is maybe a nice local brewery that's not too far from the highway. And it gave me two great examples. They were very close to each other. I chose the second one. It seemed better. And anyway, it was the same as doing a search, but I didn't have to take my eyes off the road, and I was just having a conversation with my friend Copilot.
Now, let me just ask you, Cormac McCarthy, by the way, great author, one of my favorites. I've been reading a fair bit of Flannery O'Connor lately. Did you ask Copilot about Cormac McCarthy?
I did a little bit, but it was more about in the context of the other of his stories that had been made into movies. I knew that The Passenger, I don't think, had been made into a movie, but I asked it more relevant in terms of I know that No Country for Old Men was made into a movie. I know that The Road was made into a movie. So I just was asking, were other of his stories made into movies that I didn't know about?
All the Pretty Horses was a movie, but for wherever you were journeying, Mark, let's hope that your road was not Cormac McCarthy's.
It was not as dire, and I made it in one piece.
I would love Copilot, especially on the consumer side, to be more location aware. For a trip like that, to be able to say the things that you really want to say, like as a driver, like, where's the closest gas station with a deli on the way?
Yeah. Well, here's my pitch. I think for Copilot, I don't want to ruin any features. I don't know if they're working on this or not. I doubt it. But I think Copilot or any, AI chatbot out there with this context, put it into tour guide mode. It should just know where you are, and by GPS location say, oh, hey, there's a nice national park coming up on your left. Did you know blah, blah, blah about it? And you can tune it up or down for how often it interrupts you with either you're driving or walking. But, to have a tour guide in your ear that just knows where you are. And of course, it has access to all the information of everything around you.
But it does kind of bring back to one of those principles of AI, which is to understand and have the discernment to apply editorials and executive function to it. A couple of months ago, I was driving somewhere with my son, and he said he was going to, this was ChatGPT, but he took it out to ask where we should go for lunch. And it mentioned like Giordano's and another deep dish pizza place and an Italian beef sandwich. And I'm like, does it think we're in Chicago? And so he was using the voice to thing, and he said, hey, where do you think we are? It's like, well, you're in Chicago. Like, no, we're not.
Let's blame maybe one of those intermediary services for, getting the GPS wrong.
If I could get the Italian beef somewhere on the east side, that would be fantastic. But I understand there's a new place that opened up in Georgetown, which I'm going to have to check out.
I got you. Well, maybe you will invite me and I will meet you there. Beyond sandwiches and books on tape, and of course, Copilot helping us wherever we are, I think it's now time to jump in our conversation with TJ and get the real deal, especially if you're on the enterprise side of things. What is this Microsoft 365 Copilot thing, and how it is that it helps us in our day-to-day lives at work?
Let's do it. Okay, up next on the IntraZone today, we are thrilled to be joined by TJ Devine, who is from the Copilot product team. Copilot's been everywhere, and TJ, it feels like you've been everywhere lately, so welcome.
Thank you. It has felt like I've been everywhere, and it's good to finally be here.
I'm just curious if part of where everywhere is, have you been doing any of the AI tour?
I haven't been doing the AI tour, but just in the past few weeks, I've been able to go to Atlanta to meet with a number of customers. And then I did a fun red eye to New York, met with 91 people, and then the red eye back. Great opportunity to meet with people.
Yeah, the AI tour I just want to recommend as a sidebar. For those of you who haven't had if it's coming to your city, you should go. It's a ton of content. Yeah. It's free. It's busier than you'll think. The expo has a ton of folks. I was lucky enough to catch Scott Guthrie in New York for the AI tour about a month ago. So it's a great place to go. TJ, this is your first time on the IntraZone, so would love for you to take a minute to introduce kind of yourself and kind of your journey that's led you to the pinnacle of your career, which is being on the IntraZone.
It is. Being able to talk to Mark and Chris, and man, this is fun. I'm currently in the product group. I work technically in Office AI. We focus on M365 Copilot and really a lot of the pieces that are needed to deliver that experience. I have an unusual role here where a lot of my job is to coordinate with engineers across the entire product to help organize how are we learning from customers down to how are we releasing certain features. And so that's a great spot to be in, to be able to see so much cool stuff that's coming out. I've been in this role for about a year. Before that, I was actually over in, don't hold it against me, I was over in the marketing side. And I had the chance to work on M365 and then help launch Copilot. And man, it's been an awesome journey.
It's probably great for you to be able to kind of be involved pre-launch, be part of all the energy and excitement from formulating those initial announcements, and now to be able to shape the product it's just wonderful.
If we could tap into your strategy mind, this might be going back to your Microsoft marketing hat, kind of break the ice a little bit and help the audience understand from your perspective why we're integrating AI tools like Copilot. Why are we doing that, and why has it become so important?
Yeah. In fact, as you were walking through that, I was remembering Jared Spataro coming to me in November of 2022 and saying, TJ, you've got to see this really crazy thing that the research team's been working on. I think it was that moment when the Microsoft senior leadership saw GPT 4.0. This was right before the 3.5 release, but they got an early view of 4.0. And the ability to really engage with content in a new way came into form. So all of a sudden, we have a way to be able to bring multiple pieces together and to be able to analyze and evaluate things in a whole new, much more human way than we'd had before. And it was kind of like understanding that a new mechanism could happen. I think people saw the opportunity for it right away. They saw the promise of it right away. And then it became how do we make this work in a practical aspect? And that's where a lot of our energy's gone since.
And normally you might describe some features or launches as taking the crawl, walk, run approach.
Yes.
I think this took the launch, blast, rocket approach.
And then fly for a while and then keep flapping until you can start. Yes, exactly. And we joke a lot about that. We were able to move fast. We could move fast because we launched Copilot on top of the existing product. So we didn't have to reinvent single sign-on like a lot of customers did. We didn't have to reinvent data storage or data connectors like a lot of other companies did. We were able to just build on top of and inherit all of our security policies. And so that was nice. But we decided to just go out there with a spirit of humility. And we said at the time on that March 16th announcement, we said we're going to move forward boldly, learning alongside with our customers. I think we've really tried to hold to that as we've gone forward.
You've been moving so quickly with this. I don't know if you ever have a moment to sort of catch your breath and reflect on it, but
no.
I'm just thinking about there's so many technologies that come up and they're clearly in advance and they just don't catch fire. Sometimes, some of the things people have done with immersive environments and, wrap around view screens or pick the technology. Yeah. This is different. Why do you think AI is the one that is taken off like a rocket?
I think some of this is going to be what I've seen, and then some of it's speculation. I think that we had been waiting for a long time for AI to come to fruition. And people have been saying for a few years, it looks like AI is going to be the next step, but we just haven't seen it prove itself out yet. I believe in this thing, and yet. The 4.0 story, what we showed with the 3.5 was that proof. It was enough to say, yes, this is going to be it. And whether or not it works today, man, tomorrow we'll get there. And I think that was enough to really kind of spark that particular piece. I think there was also the fact that Microsoft did the introduction instead of somebody else. I think if this had been led by something else and it was a brand new standalone piece, it would have been harder. I love the product. I loved the product Google Wave. I don't know if you guys remember that product. Man, was it really freaking cool. But it required you to adopt so many new things and have an entirely new approach and abandon a lot of what you were currently doing that just made the adoption of that so hard. Yes, people got the chat experience pretty quickly, but when we showed Copilot in Word and we showed Copilot in Excel and Copilot in PowerPoint, they're like, I can see how that can transform every day. It's not just cool, that can transform my work this afternoon.
If there's a lens of some of the things that we started with to showcase what can be done with Copilot, how we're leveraging AI, what then did you start seeing back from the community with customers? You said you just met with a customer or set of customers in New York, but in the early days or recent, we'd love to hear from you sort of on the front line, what you're hearing from customers, what they're doing, what they've liked about how they've implemented it, the scenarios, anything you can share.
Actually, I'll start a little bit with how I experienced it myself, because I will say that is a lot of what I've heard from other customers. And when we first roll it out to customers, a lot of them will initially say, as an individual, they'll say, man, this feels a little weird. The idea of having an AI sit down and write something for you sounds odd. Like, Mark, you write professionally. You write product specs, and you write scripts, and you write presentations. And the idea of an AI doing that for you just feels weird. But when you start using AI as a co-author, well, that's a lot more natural. And being able to say like, oh, can you review this for me and help me make this more concise? Or read this over for me and tell me what I'm missing? Or compare this against the last email I had from my boss in my inbox. That starts to change it. And so for me, personally, it was that gradual process. A lot of my job in those early days became helping other customers go through the exact same process, but a little less haphazardly than I did on my own. I'll say that a lot of them started off as individuals, and then it became, at a few weeks in, they would come to me and they would say, all right, this is exciting. Now, how do I start to change what I do as an organization? And that step function from individual to organizational transformation became a lot of fun.
Did a lot of that lean on some of the things that as we matured, what it is that we were offering? Early days might have been a great V1, but features and expectations as they grow, we expanded. But was some of that based on the feature set, or was it also just based on adoption practices that we were learning, or our customers were starting to climb the hill so that they could understand? I can't just put it out there. I have to showcase how it works. Maybe get some top-down type buy-in and evangelization, any of those common practices. But was that a part of it, or maybe feature set, or both?
All of the above. Actually, I'll say three things. There was the practice, there were the features, and then there was the architecture itself. If I go out of order, I think a lot of people know that in September, we announced what we called Wave 2. On September 16th, we had these big set of announcements, but those announcements really built on some underlying architectural changes we made that made the product significantly faster, that improved the quality. We saw huge improvements in our CSAT. They went from good to really good, and they went all the way up to great. And that's because we made fundamental changes to that architecture. We learned in our first year, and we were able to take advantage of that pretty quickly. We've introduced new features that allow people to do things more natural, more in the flow of work. I think, like you were saying, the biggest changes are really organizational. And the two biggest lessons that we had in our early access program were, when you roll out in groups. And that's because we're asking people not to use a new tool, but to change their behavior. And it's so much easier to use a new thing to create new habits when you can look over at what Chris is doing and say, Chris, how did you just do that? And Chris can say, oh, well, I've got this prompt, or I thought of it this way, or I had this quick idea. And so you're reinforcing there. And it also encourages you to start changing your group behavior. Maybe we don't need to have that particular stand-up. Maybe we can skip this step. Maybe we can jump straight into this particular value. So rolling out in groups had a huge advantage. And the second piece was having a senior leader who said this is a cultural priority. Our customers who had the biggest success in their rollout, and I love to use a customer Visa as an example because they let me use their name. But also they were a really early adopter, and they went out with the CIO and the CHRO as co-leads. And they said, this is a transformation in our culture. This is a transformation in how we work. And we want everybody to be innovative and thoughtful and really push the boundaries of it.
Yeah, I love also the organizations that really think boldly. Like there's another one that's public that I've done some work with the CAP group, which is over 10,000 people in finance. just across the lake here. And like they have the courage to say, this is going to be transformative. So we want to transform everyone, which is great to see. We've all spoken to customers and prospects to varying degrees about Copilot. There's also, I think, a lot of misunderstandings about what Copilot is and what it's not. And the one that I love hearing is, oh, Copilot is just Microsoft's version of ChatGPT. Like, what are some of the things that the audience really should know about what Copilot is?
Well, I hinted at one of them already, and that is it's built on top of your existing structure. So it inherits all those existing rules and requirements. And hopefully, if you're an end user, all the stuff that you don't even have to think of on a regular basis. So if your organization, for example, uses data labels to help protect confidential information, when you're using Copilot, it's going to inherit those labels. If Copilot's giving you a summary of a bunch of different documents, say that I ask it to help me get ready for writing a white paper, something I'm actually working on right now. I went into Copilot and I said, hey, I want you to gather up, the notes from these meetings and recent emails and these other documents, and, give me an outline for this document. And it applied the most secure label on top of it. And so it kept everything protected and kept everything confidential. And I really appreciate that. The second piece is that grounding. It's not something that others can do, but being able to just say in natural language, I want you to go over my prior documents. I want you to gather this up for me. I can be working in a Word document, highlight a paragraph and say, I think I got an email from Bobby about this. Can you go ahead and update this paragraph based on the email from Bobby? And it'll just go ahead and do that for you. It's those pieces that make this so much more exciting. That deep level of integration, meeting me right where I am, that matters.
I want to ask you a very, I'll say, biased intrazone audience question. You keep mentioning in a very positive way the platform, the core elements that were already there. We didn't have to rebuild it and our customers could already rely on it. One of those key components is SharePoint. And I would love for our audience to hear through your Copilot eyes and ears and mouth. What is it, that role that SharePoint plays? And this is an open field. Answer however you feel.
Look, we all know the old Bertrand Russell joke about what does the world really sit on? It sits on a turtle, and then what's below the turtle? And the joke is, well, it's turtles all the way down. But we all know that that's SharePoint. It's SharePoint all the way down.
Slow and steady. That's SharePoint.
It's there. It's there for you. That's what SharePoint is. So if you have files in your SharePoint repository that you have access to, Copilot has access to them. If there are SharePoint files out there that you don't have access to, Copilot won't even be able to see them. It's built on top of your existing permission structure. So it won't come back with, I found something, but you don't have permissions for it or any of that. Because it's built separately on top of that permissioning structure, it gives you an extra layer of security. Nobody's out there trying to jailbreak Copilot to get around that. It's outside that structure. It also lets you take advantage of things. So one of my favorite features that I love to demo right now is Click to Copilot. Mark, have you seen that? Because it's really cool.
Of course.
I was recently talking to a customer and we used that feature to create a standards document. So they said, okay, we have all of our recent announcements that we've published in this folder. I said, that's great. So let's go in, let's create an agent grounded on those that is a standard for how to write your next announcement. And we can use this agent now to not only give this standard, but to help your interns, help your marketing people, help whomever write that announcement as they go forward. So building that right on top of SharePoint, turning your files into something that can help shape how you behave and how your organization works is just so exciting.
Yeah, I think back to when Chris was leading the launch for, at the time, Viva Topics, and a lot of those models that led into the work that we did with SharePoint Premium kind of told a story of you build a model and then you can do repeated processes over and over again. And some of what I saw Copilot through that lens was abstracting this need to build the model. Not that isn't worthy in highly structured contracts and documents and at scale, like without a person doing some things. But from a Copilot perspective, and you just mentioned the creation of content or documents, train it on the kind of content that you want to create, and then it'll help you better create the next set of documents. Especially if you're querying the how do I do this, or how have we normally done X or Y?
I use it myself. So I mentioned in my intro, I run a lot of meetings. I run a big internal meeting on customer feedback, a big internal meeting on our release process, a big internal meeting on our data analysis. As somebody who facilitates meetings professionally, I like to get feedback on that. So I actually saved those transcripts into a SharePoint folder, and I've asked Copilot to help create a rubric about how I perform as a facilitator. And then every time I upload one of these, I'll say, hey, like, give me a trend line, evaluate me against our established rubric that I came up with Copilot, and tell me how can I get better and how can I improve. And every once in a while, like, tell me that I'm good because I had a down week. And Copilot is generally more or less there for me in that. And it's able to give me that kind of feedback.
It sounds like you're going to get that feedback back into the presenter coach in PowerPoint. And not only will they give you good tips and tricks, but they'll actually, like you just said, evaluate you in real time over time. Maybe we should get that one back to the PowerPoint team.
Just intrigued by Copilot is just touching so many things. And like a Copilot is an initiative as much as it's a product line, right? Because you have Copilot and GitHub and all the rest. But what are a couple of the things that Copilot is doing now that it wasn't doing at the launch that you are still super excited to tell folks about when they haven't heard of?
Okay, two big features, but then one product philosophy. Well, one of the features we've already talked about is the SharePoint piece, which is just really cool. And you could go in and you can do various versions of that, but you couldn't do what you can do today. And so I think that SharePoint piece is really awesome. We've recently introduced agents. And in September, we started talking about agents well before that. But in September, you started to see agents really come together. And every month, we've released new capabilities and new pieces. And I would encourage this group to keep an eye out for agents in the near future. But agents really help you do things that you want to go do. I'm at the stage where I try to keep a list of the stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis. I think Tyler Cohen calls it schleppbeiness. But you don't see the grunt work that you do on a regular basis. So I try to keep a manual list and just write down. And if I do something 2 or 3 times in a week, I try to build an agent that makes that easier for me. And it really helps. So that's the second piece. The third piece is really just a design philosophy. And you've seen it, especially in Copilot in Word, where we're bringing Copilot into the canvas. We're making it easier for it to use. We're making it easier for it to just show up where you want it without getting in your way. You can see that at the top of the page with the automatic summaries that will give you more and more information, the little icons that you see in the margins that make it easier for you to use Copilot in the flow of work without getting in your way. It's a design philosophy that's evolved with our customer feedback. And I think that brings the solution together.
Can we talk a little bit more about agents? I get a lot of questions around, thanks for telling us about SharePoint agents. There's a great endless use cases and a very specific skill set. Click to Copilot. Just a couple of clicks and you've got an agent that can work for you. Similar approach for what we're doing in OneDrive. Where the questions start to arise is if you start to expose a little bit of the Copilot Studio element. We sort of build Copilot Studio where you don't have to go and code. But if you do want to code or you're a real pro developer, what's our spectrum left to right, whether it's a skill set answer or a technology answer, of when we think of the kinds of agents that people will either use or build? There's the out of box all the way up to the highly customized. How do you approach answering something like that?
So there's a good tiered approach. And this is actually one of the benefits that we have by, I mentioned before, building on our platform. So we're building on Power Platform here. Power Platform had the opportunity to learn about a scaled approach for low-code, no-code development. And we're taking a lot of those lessons, we're applying them here. On the user side, where I focus a lot, we have something like Agent Builder. So I can just go into chat and I can ask it to start helping me build an agent to get something done. I might need a certain behavior. I might need it to ground in certain documents or certain connectors out to like my wiki or my CRM, or I have ServiceNow. I can access a handful of things. That's there for me. And so I do a lot of automation. My hope is that agents will be for Copilot what rules are for Outlook. And as an individual, I will have that for myself there. There's also a lot of things that I have access to that won't show up in my agent builder, like my access to my CRM or my access to my finance system. And that's because my admin has said, no, TJ, I don't want you building agents that connect to our finance system. I don't know what you're going to do with that. But they have access at an organizational level. So at an organizational level, they can roll out those types of connectors or do those types of behaviors. And that's where Copilot Studio really comes into play. So if you have good technical chops and you want to build this as an individual, or if you're an organization, you want to start rolling this out across your team, Copilot Studio is there to help you start to build much more elaborate, much more complete pieces that act as like organizational pieces of software. And it really scales up from there. You can start at the far end, you can start to move into the AI Foundry, where you're really coding and building out truly custom solutions that can go in multiple directions.
The thing about how you described and referenced rules, there's a pattern that I think is really a key thing that you hit on. With Microsoft Lists, we have rules, and they're effectively notifications triggered on some action. But you can very quickly go into Power Automate and build out a real workflow, a Power Automate flow that takes it even further beyond notifications out to other sources and, lots of transactional things that it can do on your behalf. So I wanted to give you a kudo. I thought that notion of rules or being able to simplify it down to like you would build a rule, I think is a good way to understand it.
The interesting thing about agents is it's just moving so quickly. And I think anytime you have technology that's moving quickly, there's strength in numbers. And by that, I mean, otherwise, people sometimes suffer from a failure of imagination. And I was wondering, what are some of the best examples you've seen of some of the ways people have built custom agents?
I'm going to step back and answer that slightly differently, but I'll get to that. The biggest advice I can give for Copilot all up is if it seems big and if it seems scary and if you don't know what you're doing, then you are making it too hard for yourself. The number one piece of advice I give to senior executives who are using Copilot for the first time is this hack that is called Windows H. So everyone at your desktop right now, look down. And if you see Windows H, go ahead and hit it. And if you don't, I'm sorry. Look, I love Macs. They're great devices. But Windows H is voice to text. It's not a Copilot feature. It's a Windows feature. And if you just hit voice to text and start rambling into the request, your responses are usually better, because you're providing more context, you're not overthinking it, you're just giving it the information that it needs. Sometimes separating that out and just making it easier resolves a lot of the problems. And that actually helps executives get started when they're using Copilot. It's the same thing for agents. So a lot of people will sit down and say, well, I need to treat this like a big software rollout, and I need a project plan, and I need to have an approach and a validation. I like to start teaching people about agents by starting really small. We've got a standards document on how to write error messages that one of my junior PMs use. We use that. We will bring it up in Word. We will use it in Word and Copilot to evaluate other examples of people's writings. And then I will actually go into Agent Builder. I'll ground in that document. I'll ground in a handful of examples. And I'll say, create an agent that's based on this one standards document. And I like to use that example because everybody can think of a standards document in their environment. And all you're doing is you're taking some intelligence on top of that written documentation and asking them to work together in your flow of work. Agents are really nothing more than that. You can scale up, but fundamentally it's that simple idea.
We had an example that we did at the beta timeframe with the SharePoint agents, where we had a big internal event called Microsoft Airlift. About 15,000 people get invited, and lots of people, obviously, across a couple of days. But on the initial, release of, hey, the sessions are out, and sign up and register for the event, we had a beta version of the agent front and center that was already grounded on the FAQ document that we put together, the walking PowerPoint that we had been working on as a team, all the sessions listed out. That was kind of a little bit of a hack because we were pulling that in from another system that we use for registration. And you get the point. And it really was on the front where people could go and ask it, are the sessions being recorded? What time is X or Y? Are they covering this technology? And, it took a lot of weight off the team, even in beta phase. There's refinement along the way. But I think that's a great use case to be able to say, don't make it the one app that does everything. Because you can have multiple agents. And of course, you're going to have multiple agents across multiple projects. And some are big, some are small. And to your point, weekly, you're checking on yourself. Should I build an agent for this? Because I'm getting tired of answering that question.
Exactly. And Mark, can I ask you, when you set that up, I remember using that. So thank you for building that. When you set that up, did you have all of the documentation in place when you got started?
Yeah, we had the event prior years, so we had a little history where we kind of pointed it at a document library that had most of the content already, but we did build out some specific documents, not for the agent, but because we were doing internal, rounds with getting people's approval. We put the FAQ document together and we rev that each year. So it really was kind of already grounded on the site, but we decided to, in the beta phase, you could scope it down to a document library. So we just put the important stuff in there and kept working. So it was pretty easy. It wasn't a lot of a lift, just a little data source connection to the registration, which that was not me at all. That was somebody who has a little bit more of a solution architect approach. But outside of that, that was just a matter of where does that live. If it lives within the site, then you're still at just a couple of clicks.
That's really cool.
2 weeks ago, I built an agent for one of my side projects. I'm on a couple of boards of directors. And if you're familiar with boards, you've got, people who are so-called experts like me and actual experts like the rest of the board who drop in on a company, once every 3 or 6 months. Everyone has a lot of questions to ask, and the board members have 3-year terms, and there's all of this great content, but people are asking questions time and time again that are already in the content. So I just built an agent looking at 10 years of board minutes and documents and all the rest, along with being able to interrogate, a couple of pieces of external web technology. And it's a great way to find out when's the last time we approved the budget. You can just get those answers right away instead of having to drill down for it, especially for new board members.
Mark, you said something a second ago that I wanted to pick up on because it's an evolving behavior that I've been using myself, but I also see others doing. It's that you shouldn't have just one agent. Don't go out and try to just build one agent. Part of my current job is I help certain people inside Microsoft write blog posts. We have a SharePoint folder where we keep track of the various ideas and brainstormings that we have and examples of other things that these senior leaders like, and they go into these folders. And I've built one agent that just helps us brainstorm. So we sit down every 2 weeks, we pull up the agent. It's me, the leader, and the agent. And we brainstorm together and we come up with ideas. And I have a second agent that's there to help with the writing process as we gather stuff together. And it will take my really bad notes and the meeting notes from our sessions, and it'll aggregate them into this really bad structure. And then we go back and forth and we get it tightened. And then I have a third agent that actually helps with the copywriting and polishing process. That we call the editor agent. And that those three working together, I just call them at different times and I use them in different ways, and being able to mention them in the chat bar really, really helps. And we see a very near future where they're going to start handing off to each other on their own when they hit certain milestones. And so that's the approach that we think is going to be much more natural, is where you start to think about them as discrete functions.
Yeah, I feel like when you write a Word document, there's a couple of things that I think everybody should do that almost has nothing to do with Copilot, but it follows that same pattern. You should use the editor.
Yep.
Check your grammar, check your spelling, just basically grammar check. You should also, whether it's Word, PowerPoint, or whatnot, check with the accessibility checker so that your document is more accessible and all that good stuff. And if you have something that's more tuned on, checking something specifically copyright issues, or, checking anything that's to do with the timeline of deliverables. And I think you're right to at least have a future state where it's a muscle that everybody has built so that it doesn't feel like you're doing magic each time. You feel comfortable with it. It's right there, and that you've fine-tuned what it is what you need. And if that is one agent, because it's just one agent, great. But if it's 10, if it's 20, if it's, 2 here for that project, 3 there for this event, and, just as agents everywhere, that's not a bad thing, especially as you've built them with a purpose and you yourself are familiar with where they are and how you can best leverage them.
Yeah, exactly.
I know one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about, you should know this is not a podcast where we try to extract anything that you're not supposed to talk about, but it is always fun to think about the future of Copilot. And so without exposing any of the discrete features and big announcements that are coming, how do you tell people about what we're doing next? The trend lines of we've learned a lot and now we're ensuring that Copilot can do X or Y, or we've gotten this kind of feedback, we've addressed it, that's going to take us a little time to implement. But just in general, when you think about the next 6 months, there's, of course, going to be big announcements, but I think there's also the general way to answer. So what do you tell customers when they ask questions like that?
Yeah, the best way to guess at what the Microsoft roadmap is going to look like is to look at our products today. And that's especially true with Copilot because, like I said at the very beginning, we have an aggressive strategy of learning alongside our customers. you will see tips and tricks and hints of what we're thinking in the products today. And that's really going to drive a lot of what we're doing going forward. I think the first and most obvious one is going to be agents. You're going to hear a lot more about that in the very near future. You're going to be seeing a lot of those pieces. And I think you can see the underwiring about how we might deliver new capabilities in some of what we've delivered already. We obviously have spent a lot of time thinking about the human-computer interaction model. And you can see that a lot in how Copilot is showing up in Word, how it's showing up in Excel. You can see new hints at how we're thinking about evolving that model. And I would expect us to make big steps in that direction as well. We've already rolled out new ways that Copilot can see different images and provide analysis of images. So we've rolled out, if you're sharing a chart in a Teams conversation, even if that chart is a picture, Copilot can evaluate, analyze, and give me insights into that chart. I would expect that to start coming out across the suite, maybe even voice, maybe even other approaches, because we're thinking a lot about how does the human and the computer interact with in this new model.
It's interesting to think about how our customers can keep tabs of what's going on. I'm also kind of curious about, there's a couple of sources that you need to balance kind of in your role as helping to shepherd this product forward. There's the data that you can look at. There's the stories from customers. And then there's just like innovation on its own. What are some of the things that you pay attention to help keep you inspired?
My best inspiration comes from two sources. The first is talking to the product groups themselves about what are they trying to go out and do. Now that's cheating. That's something I have access to and that a lot of our listeners don't. But they kind of do, because a lot of our senior product leaders and a lot of our junior product leaders and a lot of our devs are publishing a lot on Tech Community. And so you will be able to have really unfiltered access to a lot of their thinking and a lot of their thoughts through that Tech Community resource. I think it's a great way to stay informed and stay on top of developments. It's a good way to also glean what direction people are heading in. And then the second place that I get a lot of excitement out of is talking to customers. One of the stories that got me really excited early on, and I'll always remember it, is a local customer had originally rolled out Copilot to their incident response team. And how rolling Copilot out to their incident response team, when you're on an incident response call, they can go 6, 7, 8 hours. And having Copilot there to keep track of the call, somebody could come in and just start asking Copilot, what's happened? Have they already asked Jim? Did anyone check the red button? I think I heard something like this a few months ago. Can we check SharePoint for articles from February? And being able to do that without interrupting the call, how much time that saved them, how much it improved their results and their customer experience. Things like that are very exciting. So I encourage our listeners to talk to each other. I encourage customers when I meet with them to talk to other customers. And I spend a lot of time making connections and referrals so that they can share lessons with each other along the way.
And of course, one of the best places people are going to be able to find each other and talk to Microsoft is at the M365 Community Conference coming up in May 2025. Here ends my official plug for the event, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that that's yet another place people can plug into that.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to tell you, TJ, the thing that I have looked towards for inspiration technically right now is you, because I'm going to blend one recent feature that went out with Copilot, or is I think starting to roll out, and I can talk about it because I saw it on the roadmap, and your Control H. So the new feature is the Copilot Visual Creator within Clipchamp. And just to put the little spin on how this thing works, you just type a prompt, but according to TJ, now we're going to use Control H to create our prompt using our voice. And I'm going to say something to the effect of, I need to create a little internal training video based on before you attend the Microsoft 365 Community Conference, what do you need to know? Can you help me create a 30 to 45 second video? Clipchamp, go. And I'll do a little better with my voice to text, but I think that's going to be my first test of inspiration based on your Control H suggestion, and certainly a kind of a fun Clipchamp feature that is now rolling out.
It's really cool. I've had fun playing with Clipchamp. It's been a really good feature.
All right. Well, TJ, I think we've pulled out of your mind all the things that hopefully can get our audience thinking, What should they do with Copilot? How should they think about adopting it? Using Control H. You're no longer a prompt engineer. You're a Control H engineer. So thank you for joining us on the IntraZone. We always, of course, want to thank you in a much more broader way. Thank you for everything you've been doing with Copilot, because I think mostly if there's anything out there that makes sense for Copilot, it's because TJ probably produced it.
Absolutely not. But guys, thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been fantastic.
Up next on the IntraZone, events. There's a ton of events and a very busy slate between now and the next few months. So here are some that we're watching. And we're going to start out with the Ability Summit. That's starting March 18th. It is online, focusing at accessibility and all of the important ways the technology adapts to everyone.
Yeah, they always get a lot of great speakers, including Jenny Leigh-Fleury, who is one of our lead accessibility execs here at Microsoft, but always a great lineup of people and always a great focus of enabling, the outreach of technology and, of course, how we are interacting with each other to make sure it's inclusive and certainly available to everyone. In March 24th to the 27th in Redmond and online, if you're a Microsoft valued professional or valuable professional, I always get that wrong, MVP Summit 2025 is going to be taking place, where it really is a mind meld of a lot of what Microsoft is doing, leading with some of our closest partners who, why we always mention it, at some point are great advisors out to our other partners and, of course, our customers. So know that the MVP Summit is happening. It may not be a newsworthy thing for the broader set of people that are listening to this episode, but you should know it always pays forward, because shortly after March, when there's the embargo lift across everything that gets shared there, it's then really for you to know if you come across an MVP, they always have great insights and information that are based on a lot of the core direction that Microsoft is deciding to go into.
There was one of those events years ago where an MVP, after having been told you can't share any pictures of what you're going to hear today, tweeted out a picture of the slides saying you can't share this information, saying you have no idea how great this is going to be.
Oh, well, that's a slippery slope. I hope that they didn't get slapped on the back of the hand too hard, because that's more fun than not. But Chris, the next one, AIM in Atlanta. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, the Association for Intelligent Information Management. I'm on the board of directors there, following in the heels of good friend of the program, Ian Story. So this year, the AI plus IM Summit is coming to the Hyatt Regency in Atlanta, Georgia. That's March 31st through April 2nd. So I'll be delivering a session on the 10 things you've got to do with Copilot and the 5 things you might want to have a second thought about trying with AI. So definitely, if you're going to be in the area, you can visit us and learn more at aiim.org.
I like that. I hope that maybe something that we talked about with TJ might be on your list of 5, one of those cautionary tales. Similar exact timing, in fact, March 31st to April 2nd in Las Vegas, Nevada, is the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference. Of course, competing with AIM, I know that, Chris, you can't be in 2 places at once, but if you're cut from the same cloth as me, you would want to be at the Fabric Community Conference. So FYI, if you're into big data and how you can manage it at scale, the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference, March 31st through April 2nd.
Early in April, there's going to be a very special event for Microsoft. Microsoft is turning 50 this year. So that'll be a worldwide event online coming up on April 4th. And if you've ever wondered, what do you give as a 50th anniversary gift to a company that's one of the most valuable companies on earth, you can just show up and learn what the next 50 years are going to look like.
I think that's smart. Or you could just get a paper clip and put some googly eyes on it and say, look, I created my own clipping.
Candlesticks are always good.
Ooh, candlesticks and paper clips it is. So next up for events, Comms vNext. This is April 15th through the 16th in Denver, Colorado. As it sounds, it's talking about what's coming to communications vNext for you, whether it's unified communications, leveraging Teams for collaboration, and all the tools, of course, that integrate with Teams. It's a really nice event in Colorado. I think one of my peers, Lori Pottmeyer, is planning to be there. So if you're in the Denver area or want to fly there to get on up with what's going on with Comms vNext, April 15th to the 16th.
And then starting in early May, there's an event. Mark, I don't know if you know about this one yet.
I've heard a little bit about this one.
Yeah, it says here, let me make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. The Microsoft 365 Community Conference. Why does that sound so familiar? Of course, it's the M365 conference. So Microsoft is going to be there with Jeff Teeper, Jairus Spataro, all of the usual and new faces coming from across the product teams, as well as a great lineup of MVPs, experts, partners, customers. The networking will be off the charts. If there's one event to make this spring, this is going to be the event.
Chris, let's do a little ping pong match here. What are you doing at the conference? You go first, then I'll go.
I'm doing a session on using Microsoft Viva to establish a leadership culture in your organization. Go.
Wow. Okay. Well, I have been put in charge of the Microsoft Community Lounge up on the 3rd floor. We're going to have meetups. We're going to have table topics. We're going to have interviews. We're going to do a whole bunch of fun activities. So if you want to maybe get some stickers, I can't quite announce the swag, but we're getting close to locking in on the swag. But it is a place for the community to come together, learn about the programs that are focused and oriented around the community, learning about new technology, connecting with each other, of course, events throughout the year with communitydays.org. All those things, we're going to be pitching all the programs, but it's really a great place to stop by, take some pictures, learn about the different programs, and engage with the different activities that we have going throughout the week. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll be talking more about the conference both here and on some of the other platforms that we have in the weeks and months to come. I really can't wait for that event.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to miss it. So there's another big event. It's a Microsoft first-party event called Microsoft Build. If you are a developer or even developer adjacent, because I always think it's very important to know at least what developers either need to know or already know or can do so that you can have those educated discussions about the art of the possible. We want to build something. Is it possible? How do we do it? That's May 19th through the 22nd. It's in Seattle, Washington, but also online. It's one of the most accessible conferences I think that Microsoft puts out there right alongside Microsoft Ignite. So there is no session that can be missed either at the time of it's being delivered or on demand. So if you're a developer and you want to learn about things as adjacent to this show, like the SharePoint framework or some things I don't even pretend to understand that you can do in Azure with development services, there's so much that Microsoft Build puts out, and it's a big news moment for Microsoft as well. So at least stay tuned to your radio, your television, your internet, your phone, whatever. Microsoft Build, May 19th through the 22nd.
The SharePoint Intranet Festival. So this is a joint production between Microsoft and Swoop Analytics. It's going to be coming May 21st during Build, and it's going to be online as well. So lots of places to plug in if you're tired from your trip to Las Vegas.
Yeah, and I'll just say a little bit about this. It's a little bit of a selfish plug, but I'm actually going to be presenting during the SharePoint Intranet Festival. It's a little bit of a carryover because there are a few things that we're planning to announce at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. And I did a little partner handshake with Kai and the Swoop Analytics team to basically give a little bit of here's what we shared at the conference for the festival. Of course, there's more that's at the festival, and the focus really is customer stories. So I'm going to bring a little product news. The rest of the festival is really focused on how are customers building out their SharePoint intranet, the choices that they're making, the technology they're taking advantage of, and just the customer voice to be available for Q&A and those types of things. So it's a really nice event. They've done it for a number of different products at Microsoft. And of course, we signed up to support them because that one's all about SharePoint.
If you haven't actually checked out the intranet side of SharePoint in the last year or two, you owe it to yourself to check in on it for the breadth of capabilities in things like the brand manager and in the new flexible layouts. And it is much easier than ever before to make a bespoke intranet page easily and efficiently. And so you'll definitely see that coming up at that event online. So, and then rounding out the month of May, Mark?
Yeah, rounding out the month of May, it's over and across the pond in Dusseldorf, Germany for the European Collaboration Summit. This is May 26th through the 28th. I've been to a couple of ECSs, as I think, Chris, you have also in the past. And it's always a great time for not only to bring the community together, lots of great sessions, workshops, keynotes. I think one thing that's kind of unique about the European Collaboration Summit is the style of the keynotes, at least in the last few years, has been a little bit more conversational instead of the typical presentation one-to-many. Both are very valuable, especially if one's oriented around a lot of news and something you haven't heard of. The Collaboration Summit, of course, is going to be news and newsworthy, but it really is a conversation of how to best use technology. How can we all work together to share ideas? And in the conversation style of, at least at the keynote level, you really get to hear people more talking in how they approach their methodologies and use of technology and the things that they've learned versus just focusing on the news and what are the new features. So I always like going to ECS. I hope I get to go this year. I don't know that answer yet. I don't know if you already know if you're planning on going to Dusseldorf for the European Collaboration Summit. But if yes, Chris, give us a little insight. If not, we will continue to move on.
I'd love to, but it is also happening 3 days before my daughter's high school graduation. So I'm not going to chance it this time.
Understood. All right. ECS will be for other people, but for those other people, if that's you, we encourage you to check out their page and, of course, register and join them in Dusseldorf.
And there you have it. As I mentioned, it's a really full calendar of events over the next 2 months. And if somehow we missed one, please be sure to get in touch with us and we'd be happy to feature it on a future episode of the IntraZone.
To close out, we want to thank our guest TJ Devine for sharing his knowledge and practical insights about how he goes about using and explaining Copilot.
We encourage you to check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. Visit us at aka.ms/theintrazone.
And at any time, you can send us your questions, send us your feedback. We'll get it to the SharePoint teams, or if it's directly to Chris and I, of course, we'll take it directly. You can reach us anytime at theintrazone@microsoft.com, or send us something through Twitter at mcashman and at cmcnulty2000.
Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Follow us wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
We thank you for listening. I'm Mark Cashman, and this has been The IntraZone, a show about the Microsoft 365 LLM prompt-filled intelligent intranet.